I knew it. I shouldn't have been invited here tonight. You should have included me out. Because the first thing I noticed, before I had even taken my coat off in your minds, was my own tidy little clerk in a green visor, sorting you into piles, safe, unsafe, agreeable, disagreeable. For me, against me, long before love had a chance to breathe. I caught him red-handed, stamping your foreheads with my verdicts and calling it discernment, all in the name of spiritual maturity. And the humor of it, if we can still laugh, was that I felt lighter for a moment, as if righteousness were oxygen. Then I felt the collar tighten. Isn't that a strange exchange? We try to get free by sentencing someone else. We call it just being right, and the iron bars slide home. Now let's say the paradox plainly, so we do not spend an hour arguing with the obvious. You cannot condemn and be free in the same breath. You can't. Condemnation is not a comment about them. It is a cell you step into, locked from the inside, and decorate with scriptural plaques. Judge not, that ye be not judged. You know the line. Some of you have it crocheted on pillows. But feel the physics of it. The very act of measuring another's wrong becomes the tape that binds your own ankles, and the mind whispers, only fair. Do you think it is the God self of us that tightens the jaw, that rolls the eye, that keeps a little ledger of wrongs? Do you think Christ within needs a file cabinet? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So when liberty evaporates the moment your brother appears who just took the bench, the Spirit or your humanhood in its robe. I confess to you, since we are beginning with honesty, that I hold a degree in being right. If heaven issued diplomas for swift verdicts, I would be magna cum laude with a minor in sarcasm. My next incarnation, if I am not careful, will be a branch bank manager of moral credit, stamping approved and denied on souls in triplicate. And do you see the joke? The stamp always leaves ink on my own hand. I walk around marked by the very condemnation I delivered. So let's begin as auditors of our own inner courthouse, not inspectors of your neighbor's shop. We are not going on a witch hunt for someone else's wrongdoing. We are going to stand very still here. Be still and know that I am God. And watch in real time the instant the inner judge rises, the inward robe shimmers, the gavel lifts, and observe what that does to our peace, our breath, our shoulders, our belly. Watch how quickly the breath shallows, how quickly the heart remembers an old wound and volunteers to be wounded again for the pleasure of being right about it. Feel how the room shrinks. Who imprisoned whom? The first prison bar is always the unnoticed verdict we call just being right. Hear it in your day. The driver who does not understand lanes. The co-worker who misunderstands a sentence you have already explained twice. The child who forgets what you never say kindly. The partner's tone. That sacred tone. And there the judge stands. You step into the cell and call it a sanctuary of truth. It isn't. It is the chapel of humanhood where we worship our private grievance, and the incense is our own peace burning away. We are not here to make ourselves bad for noticing this. We are here to notice it before it notices us. The live audit begins now. Catch the moment the verdict forms, not tomorrow when the story has grown glorious horns. Catch it as the eyelid hardens, as the mouth prepares the defense. Ask yourself, quiet and swift, do I want freedom or do I want to be right? You cannot serve two masters. In that half second, you may die a very small death, the death of the personal self's favorite occupation, but what a resurrection follows. A softening, a little laughter, a release you did not manufacture, a hint that the Christ presence was never threatened, only veiled by your robe. If we can agree to this much, to watch the bench within us taking shape, and to admit that the cell door swings inward, then we have opened a window. There is air. There is the beginning of liberty. And perhaps by the end of tonight, we will retire the judge and go home unaccompanied by a prosecutor in our head. But for now, simply look. The gavel is in your hand. Will you lay it down long enough to breathe? I will tell you why that little gavel feels so smooth in the hand, because it pays. Judgment is a payroll department for the personal self. It deposits a feeling thin but intoxicating that I am safe because I am right, superior because someone else is wrong, justified because I have a case thicker than the Oxford Dictionary. The robe is velvet for a reason. It warms humanhood against the chill of its own insecurity. I know this because I have worn that robe on rainy afternoons and, forgive me, on sunny mornings too. The wage is a tiny throne, and the rule of the throne is simple. Someone must be beneath it, or it collapses under its own pretense. But let me ask, since we must not be content with my confession to excuse your own, do you think peace comes from winning the case? Do you think that when the inner jury says guilty, the kingdom of heaven applauds? Do you think God is your court reporter, transcribing your grievances for the archives of eternity? Did the Master ever say, "Blessed are the correct, for they shall be comforted"? Or did he say, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God"? And what clouds the heart faster than a secret relish for another's fault, polished and kept under glass? Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, said the Christ. Not as the world giveth and the world pays in the coin of being right about someone else's wrong. The Christ pays in a different currency altogether, and it does not spend in courts. Look at the cost column, since we are doing honest bookkeeping. The body tells on us. The shoulders inch toward the ears as if to eavesdrop on our own indictment. The breath goes shallow. The stomach practices the knot it will tie at 2 a.m. And then we say, with pious indignation, "She did this to me." No, dear heart, you did it to you by convening court. You summoned counsel, swore in witnesses, entered exhibits, and built a scaffold in your chest for the execution. The driver who cut you off did not tighten your diaphragm. Your inner bailiff did. The friend who forgot to call did not darken your day. The shadow fell when you drew the blinds of condemnation. And the irony, the deep, ridiculous irony is that we then condemn them for the darkness we manufactured. Why do we keep paying out our freedom for this dingy wage? Because the ego has sold us an insurance policy. If I can be right, I can be safe. If I can be right, I can be superior. If I can be right, I can be justified in my sorrow, which is another way of saying I can keep it. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, said the Master. Do you think he spoke only of the breath and bones? No. He spoke of the whole elaborate life we are saving, the identity that must be right. What does it profit a man to gain the whole docket, verdicts in his favor from dawn to dusk, and lose his soul's simple liberty? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So test your verdicts by this one experimental question. Does liberty increase? If not, you have been paid in counterfeit coin. I had a week once where I won every case in my private court. Brilliant briefs, razor arguments. I felt 10 feet tall and slept 4 feet short. I could not pray. I could not hear. I had the last word, not the first whisper of God. Have you noticed? The more right we are, the more alone we become. The robe is warm, yes, until you realize it is also a shroud. Outwardly cold-blooded, inwardly overheated, but with what? Not love, friction. So we diagnose it without pity for the personal self and without hatred for it either. Judgment survives because it pays the personal self, and the wage is a throne that costs your freedom. That is all. Do not blame yourself. You have simply believed the advertisement. And when next the hand reaches for the gavel, ask quickly, as a lover speaks softly in the night, do I want the wage, or do I want the peace, not as the world giveth? The God self of us has no case to win and nothing to defend. Humanhood loves a bench. Christ needs no courtroom. Die daily to the need to be right, and begin, even now, to feel the floor of the cell turn to air. Now let's place humanhood right on the bench where it loves to sit and see what it does to the wound. By humanhood, I mean the sense of selfhood apart from God, the orphan identity that must interpret to exist, must accuse to feel solid, must defend in order to hear its own heartbeat, must relitigate yesterday to prove it was here today. It has no light of its own, so it survives on sparks from friction. It is a court that only stays open if a case is pending, and so have you noticed. It quietly manufactures a case when the docket runs empty. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily. Deny which self? The one that needs a defendant in order to rise in the morning. Die daily to that self, and watch how quickly the courtroom lamps dim. See the cause and effect with me, simply as you would watch a kettle boil. A hurt arises, a word misheard, a glance misplaced, an absence that felt like abandonment. That is one thing. But then comes the bench. How dare she, always him? See, they never. Now the wound, which could have closed like a clean cut with a quiet breath, is reopened with sterile instruments called evidence. The mind returns to the scene not to heal, but to prove, not to love, but to prosecute. Judge not, that ye be not judged, is not a moral bumper sticker. It is a diagnostic. The act of judging is the act of re-injuring. We are back under the knife, and the surgeon is our own indignation. Do you think the God self of us needs to replay that moment at 2 a.m. in order to be? Do you think the Christ within requires a slideshow of wrongs to validate his presence? Or is it our humanhood, trembling a little in the dark, that says, if I stop telling this story, I will vanish? I had a small offense last month, nothing you would bother your pastor about, just a line in a letter that bent the wrong way. For 2 days I could feel the tiny incision. It should have closed overnight. But I, in my wisdom, became counsel for the prosecution and defense, both eloquent, both sleepless. The sting did not come from the line. It came from the life support equipment I had attached to it. When faith is thin, we hook our IV to grievance and call it nutrition. Here is the paradox we must face sternly and tenderly at once. The pain is not only what happened. The pain is the costume we put on afterward, the one who was harmed, and then we must keep the play running to justify the outfit. We keep a story alive, because without it the personal self has no lines to speak. As he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Think as the harmed one, be the harmed one. Think as the Christed one, be free. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. But old things do not pass while we are polishing them for presentation to tomorrow's jury. Do you see the economic genius of humanhood? Condemnation is its steady employment. The separated self draws a salary from every replay. It collects benefits from every retold injury. And what does it purchase? A longer lease on a smaller room. When we condemn, we sign a renewal for the identity that thrives on walls. When we release, even for a breath, the identity gasps for lack of oxygen, and the Christ breath fills the lungs without our help. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where the spirit of condemnation is, there is continuity of pain. Let us call this cause and effect by its plainest name, so that we may be done with mystery where there is none. The wound persists because judgment keeps the separated self in business. Take away the bench and the wound has no audience. Take away the gavel and the case collapses for lack of jurisdiction. I am not asking you to excuse evil. I am asking you to deny employment to the identity that feeds on it. Hold still, be still, and know that I am God. And watch as the story loses funding. The scene grows dim, not because we deny that it happened, but because we deny it power to tell us who we are. And then, like a summer cut that closes in the sun, you may feel the tender place knit quietly, without parade, when no inner judge is present to pick the scab for evidence. In that moment, you will know why the Master could say, "Thy faith hath made thee whole," and not thy perfect argument. Faith in what? In the presence that needs no proof, and in the self that lives not by verdicts, but by spirit. Die daily to the courtroom self, and the wound will tire of auditioning. It will go home, and you will too. Let's twist that Bible upside down, and if it falls out of our pockets, let it land right side up inside of us. Because many of us, without malice and with beautiful embroidery, have stitched a mosaic courtroom into our rib cage, measure for measure, tooth for tooth, ledger for ledger, polite vengeance baptized in religious ink. We call it fairness, we call it balance, but all the while the breath grows short and the room grows small, and we say, "I only want what's due." Do you think it is the God self of us that keeps a ruler in the sleeve ready to take measurements on neighborly sins? Do you imagine the infinite counting on his fingers, one insult, two slights, three late apologies? Or is it our humanhood, lovable but lost, that says, "If I do not keep score, I will disappear"? The Master came, and the world heard a new arithmetic that seemed like bad accounting to those of us who love our columns neat. "Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye," he began. And then, oh, the scandal to the clerk within, "But I say unto you, resist not evil, do not manage it, do not curate it, do not pin it like a specimen for tomorrow's show and tell. Forgive 70 times 7, not because we are hoping for a medal, but because we are no longer living by numbers. The red letters do not offer a better method for retaliation. They retire the very judge who calculates it. Bless them that curse you is not piety, it is oxygen. It lets the chest stop being a courtroom and become a chamber for God. Now, I do not want you to quote me neatly and miss the blood of it. Hold no one in condemnation is not a moral performance. It is spiritual hygiene. Like washing the hands that touched a hot stove of memory. Like rinsing the eyes that have stared too long at yesterday's headline. If you must paraphrase Scripture, do it in your kitchen language. Drop the sentence, drop it now for your freedom's sake. Bless without bargaining, release without a receipt. Pray for those who despitefully used you, not to win points or get a better parking space in heaven, but because your own breath asks for it. Someone will whisper, "But are we pretending? Are we calling wrong right?" No. Forgiveness is not theatrical amnesia. It is seeing without the sentence. The fact may stand in the yard. It does not get to come into the house and sit on your heart with its boots on. You look straight through the event until you behold the one thing the court cannot see, the Christ that neither injured nor was injured. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Do you hear the order? First, the dropping of the gavel, then the rising into a life where sin has nothing to feed on. Christ consciousness does not manage wrongdoing. It removes the atmosphere in which wrongdoing breathes within us. Condemnation, and in that clear air, action becomes guidance instead of reaction. Try this as an experiment, not as a rule with a badge. The next time your mind begins cross-examination at midnight, do not argue. Don't wave verses like warrants. Be still. Feel the robe slipping from your shoulders. Whisper a living paraphrase. I do not recruit God to my verdict. I return to the presence where no verdict lives, and then sit outwardly cold-blooded and inwardly overheated with love. Love not for the story or against the story, but for the Christ that is the only life of all in the story. See what follows. Perhaps a call to make, perhaps a boundary to set, perhaps silence. But notice what is absent. The prosecutor in your head demanding reparations. The promise is simple, and it will offend any theology that needs villains to feel holy. When condemnation drops, the mind returns to its source like a river surrendering to the sea. The factory that manufactures suffering, measure for measure thinking, powers down for lack of orders. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Not because the world has ceased being the world, but because you have ceased being its clerk. Die daily to the inner law of retaliation, and you will find yourself living by a law you do not have to enforce. Love without the contract, mercy without the ledger, freedom without a case. And in that freedom, you will not be naive, you will be clear. You will not pretend, you will perceive. And perception, anointed with no condemnation, is the beginning of wisdom and the end of the little jail in your chest. All right, let's do it without robes or incense, right here while your shoes touch the floor. Bring to mind gently, but honestly, the person, the group, the headline you can't stand. Don't choose a saint. Choose the neighbor whose dog testifies at 5 a.m., the politician whose smile makes you reach for disinfectant, the in-law who can find your last nerve with sonar. Let them stand, not to be punished, but to show you the mechanism. Now watch for the very first label that leaps: selfish, stupid, dangerous, always, never. Hear the courtroom word? Always, never. See the bench erecting itself out of syllables? And before you polish the label into a sermon, check the body. Where did the first shiver of iron appear? In the jaw that has decided before a word is heard? In the eyelids narrowing into slits that can no longer see God? In the shoulders inching up like two worried ushers? In the belly pulling tight as if to hold in a verdict? The body tells you the gavel has lifted. Now, without philosophy and without self-beating, name it. Here is judgment. Not I am a terrible person. Not they are a terrible person. Not even. This is justified. Just the phenomenon arising in consciousness, like a sudden wind. Here is judgment. Say it as you would note a cloud crossing the sun. Here is the bench rising. Here is the robe trying to settle on my shoulders. Here is the gavel in my hand. Do you feel the difference? The instant you can say, here is, you have stepped half a breath outside the I am that was fused with it. That thin step is the crack where grace enters. Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The temptation is not merely to do something rash. The temptation is to become the judge so completely that you do not know you are judging. Our practice is watching, not accusing the judgment, not defending it, watching. Be still and know that I am God is not a command to go limp. It is a directive to stand at the window of awareness and see the weather of thought move without moving you. Try it now. Keep the face or headline in view, and let the label that first leapt now hang on a hook labeled activity. Do you think it is the God self of us that needs to paste that label to its forehead? Or is it our humanhood, hungry to be right, quick to hire out the breath as bailiff? Notice what happens when you name it cleanly. The breath that had shortened lengthens without a bargain. The shoulders that had risen like frightened birds remember the nest. The room grows a foot wider. A laugh small, perhaps impolite, flirts with the corner of your mouth. The person you can't stand has not changed, but you have shifted from inhabitant of the courtroom to observer of the setup crew. Freedom begins here. not at the end of a long moral campaign, not after you have collected 70 apologies and a notarized confession, but at the millisecond judgment is seen as a doing, not a being. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where is it? In the simple space between I am right and here is judgment. That space is Spirit's doorway. Make the observation thorough. Catch the first adjective. Catch the first tightening. Catch the first movie trailer of what you will say next time you're ready. And each time, answer with the same plain identification. Here is judgment. Do not make a second sin by condemning the condemnation. Judge not, that ye be not judged. Include your own inner weather. Let it blow through. If it helps, add a line the Master loved to begin with. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent, metanoia, change the mind. Pivot the vantage. Not punish yourself, pivot. The kingdom is at hand, not at the end of a winning argument. It is at hand in the very seeing that you are not the robe you almost wore. I once timed it. In the space of a single elevator ride, a whole trial began and concluded inside my ribs opening statement, hostile witness, closing fury, and on the dismounting floor, I remembered to whisper, here is judgment. The trial ended, not because I convinced myself of anything noble, but because light entered through the hairline fracture in the idol of being right. That is all we are doing now, creating lawful fractures. The light does the rest. Keep this practice near the front pocket of your day. Call no special meeting. In the market, at the red light, at the memory of last year's slight, here is judgment. And feel as if from the other side of a thin veil, the presence that needs no verdict begin to breathe you. Now that we can say, here is judgment, we need a way home that does not hand the map back to the judge. This is the return method, and it is as undramatic as turning your face to the window. First, catch. Second, be still. Third, recognize the Christ presence. That's all, and the all is everything. Catch the verdict in the act, not to punish it, but to stop feeding it. Let the bowl of attention be moved away from the prosecutor's desk. I can of mine own self do nothing, said the Master. That includes forgiving. The personal self makes a poor carpenter. Its benches are crooked, its gavel splinter. So we stop building. We be still. Be still and know that I am God. Not be clever, not be right, be still. And in that stillness, not a vacancy but a presence, announces itself without trumpet, Christ in you, the hope of glory. Do you think the God self of us needs a better argument? Do you think the Christ within is waiting for your closing statement to take the bench? Or is it the opposite? The bench dissolves in the light of his being, and what remains is seeing, simple and whole. Here is how I do it. In kitchen words, you can whisper while buttering bread, Father, show me what is true here without my sentence attached. You can make it shorter if you like. Show me what is true. Or, let this mind be in me, which was also in Christ Jesus. Or, not I, Father, but thou in me. Any line that loosens the fist of I will be more forgiving and opens the hand of Christ, see for me. The second step, be still, is the hinge. Be still for 5 breaths as if you were standing at the edge of a lake at dawn, not to fish, not to photograph, just to be outwardly cold-blooded, inwardly overheated with love for God and man. Do not debate the mind's last few objections. Let them flap like laundry and dry out. If the body has already been drafted into service as the courtroom, set it quietly free, unfurrow the brow, let the shoulders fall from the ears, feel the belly cease its subpoena writing, The body is only a tomb if you live inside it with your case. Step outside, even for a minute, and use it as an instrument for stillness. The third step is not our work, it is our welcome. Recognize the Christ presence. How? By noticing that the atmosphere is not the same as it was a breath ago. The room grows a window, a mercy not sentimental, not syrupy, but clear as fresh water appears where iron had been. You didn't make it. Abide in me, and I in you, for without me ye can do nothing. Stay there a moment, not for phenomenon, but for fidelity. If a memory tries to reinsert the indictment, smile at it the way you would at a child sneaking back into the kitchen after bedtime. Not now. We are in God. Then, from that presence, let the seeing occur. Let Christ awareness be what sees here. Look again at the face, the email, the headline, but not with your sentence riding shotgun. Ask softly, Father, what is true here without my sentence? And then do the most un-American thing in the world. Wait. Not long. Just long enough to feel the urgency to prosecute begin to die. Die daily. Yes, even to the thrill of the chase that makes the ego feel athletic. In that little death, something rises quiet and taller than your reasoning. Sometimes it says, make the call and bless. Sometimes set a clean boundary with no heat. Sometimes be silent and let tomorrow carry tomorrow. But always, always, the guidance comes without condemnation's aftertaste. This is not a moral stunt, it is spiritual oxygen. Forgiveness is not manufactured. It is the natural climate wherever Christ is acknowledged as the only selfhood present. You will discover, to your surprise and relief, that you can see facts more clearly when the fog of verdict has burned off. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Do you hear the order again? No condemnation. Then new action. The Master did not say, I will lower your sentence to time served. He dropped the bench out from under the entire play and let being be being. Practice it as daily return, not as a rare performance before a difficult audience. Catch here is judgment. Be still, and know. Recognize, Father. Show me what is true here without my sentence. 5 breaths, 10 if necessary, 70 times 7 if you've got a lively case on your hands. And notice, beloved, the humor that creeps back in when the cell door swings open and there's no one holding it shut but a memory. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Where is it? Not in the impressive apology you extracted, nor in the beautifully reasoned prayer you delivered to yourself in the shower, but in the bare return to presence. Return, and watch how quickly the urge to prosecute forgets your address. Return, and find that your heart has become monastic in the middle of the marketplace, insulated from hatred, available to love. Return and learn the strangest ease, living without a prosecutor in your head because the case has been dismissed for lack of a separate self to try. Standing in that presence, we must ask, what kind of love is this that appears when the courtroom lights go out? It is not the trembling, sticky love we were sold as kindness. It is not the feverish alliance that says, I'll take your side, and in return, you'll validate my virtue. That is pity. A 2-story house with stairs creaking under the weight of above and below, rescuer and rescued, superior and inferior. Pity keeps 2 selves alive because it must. It needs someone to need and someone to be needed, or it can't breathe. Do you think it's the God self of us that requires a stage of misfortune to feel generous? Do you think the Christ in you waits for a dramatic soundtrack to move? Or is it our humanhood, dear and insecure, that says, if I stop burning with their story, I will go cold and invisible? Impersonal love is a different climate. It seems cold to the personal sense because it refuses to hate with you. It refuses to be hired by the narrative. It refuses to pump air into a costume marked victim or villain. It will not join your tribe against their tribe. It will not barter solace for allegiance. God is no respecter of persons. And when love moves as God, it beholds no persons to be respected more or less. It beholds Christ as the only selfhood present. Human sympathy whispers, take a side, or you do not care. Christ's love answers, I take no sides because I am the whole. Outwardly, it may look cold-blooded. You are not weeping on cue. You are not flinging yourself across the barricade. Inwardly, it is overheated with love for God and man, a quiet furnace, steady as sunrise. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, said the Master. Do you hear the insulation? Bless, yes, curse, no. Heat without hatred, light without smoke. Someone will say, but isn't that aloof? Isn't that unfeeling? Not if you have tasted it. Impersonal love is feeling purified of contract. It feels deeply, so deeply that it can remain still when drama demands a duet. It sees facts clearly, the broken bone is still a bone, and because it is not busy being somebody's savior, it can become useful. Charity never faileth, not because it is sentimental, but because it cooperates with God instead of the story. The personal self, hopped up on pity, burns hot and fast, then it resents, then it collapses, then it hides. Impersonal love burns steady and leaves no ash. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. Why? Because the burden of managing another's identity has been laid down. The yoke is simply presence. Let me confess a little. Since you prefer your medicine with a human flavor, I used to arrive at crises in full costume, wet-eyed, hand on the brow, ready to mortgage my sleep for someone's approval of my compassion. I drained, they stayed the same. We both learned to depend on adrenaline. Then I began this practice of returning catch, be still, recognize, and I walked into a similar scene, not armed with tissues, but with quiet. I brought a pot of soup instead of a speech, and a locksmith's number instead of a lecture. We sat. I did not agree with the story. I agreed with God. The heat in the room dropped by 10 degrees, and the clarity rose. There was a boundary to set it, no heat. There was an apology to make, made it, no grovel. There was nothing to hate, refused it, and hatred went looking for another employer. Perfect love casteth out fear. Not louder love, not sweatier love, perfect, which simply means whole. How do you cultivate this so-called cold warmth? Die daily to the helper who needs a receipt. When the plea for alliance arrives, hate with me, or you do not love me, catch the little contract in the envelope. Be still and ask, Father, show me what is true here without my sentence or my bargain. Then behold, as a quiet seeing takes your eyes, this one is Christ's selfhood, no less than yours. This fact needs honest action, not emotional gasoline. Sometimes you will hold a hand. Sometimes you will say no. Sometimes you will make a call. Always, you will refuse to feed the story with condemnation. And because you refuse to trade heat, you will not deplete. You will finish the hour with breath to spare and joy left over, because your heart is being heated from within by the presence, not from without by the friction of roles. Impersonal love is not less loving. It is love without the ego's emotional contracts. It does not perform, it abides. It does not sign up to prosecute or to defend, stands as witness. Neither do I condemn thee. It is monastic in the marketplace, insulated but not isolated, free to see and therefore free to serve. And the marvelous surprise is this. Those who once mistook your steadiness for coldness will begin to feel the safest in your company, because your warmth does not depend on their story, staying sad or sinful. You carry no bench, no gavel, no bargain, only a presence that refuses to hate and therefore has room to heal. Let me ask the questions that blow the dust off our excuses. Do you think God hates who you hate? Do you think the infinite delays the sunrise until your indignation has had its coffee? Do you think the God self of us scans our contact list, circles the offenders in red, and says, yes, I approve this grudge? Do you think truth needs your verdict to be true? God is love, not sometimes, not on alternate Tuesdays, not when your case is airtight. God is love. Do you imagine love sharpening a spear because you sent up a hot prayer? Or is it our humanhood, dear, nervous, eager to be paid, that dresses its outrage in choir robes and calls it discernment? Do you think the Holy One withholds peace until you have punished them inwardly with the clever sentence you rehearsed in the shower? Do you think omnipresence waits for your nod to be present to that neighbor, that politician, that memory? He maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, which means, brace yourself, he does not subscribe to your blacklist. Do you think it is the God self of us that needs a villain in order to be virtuous? Or is it the little proprietor of humanhood who says, if I stop condemning, there will be nothing left of me but silence? And fearing that very silence in which God speaks calls its fear wisdom. Do you think the Christ within must be bribed by your severity? I will have mercy and not sacrifice, says the Master's mouth. Yet the personal self sacrifices joy, sleep, even digestion, and presents the burnt offering to heaven, asking for a receipt. Do you think infinite intelligence requires your rage to see clearly? Or is your rage the fog that makes you feel important? I know this mechanic. I've employed him often. He takes my raw fear, stamps it with prudence, wraps it in 3 scriptures and a proverb from grandmother, and waves it like a warrant. Then, with a straight face, he asks God to sign it. Do you think the signature that wrote, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, endorses your private hanging? Do you think the Spirit who whispered, judge not, made an exception for that one headline, for that one family scene, for that one betrayer who surely voids the red letters? Do you think the truth that maketh free does so by chaining your enemy to your imagination? Or is it our humanhood that keeps the chain in both hands and calls the weight conviction? Be honest. Has your condemnation ever turned a heart, or has it only sculpted your face into the mask of a clerk, careful, tired, tight around the mouth? With what measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. Do you think God sends the measurement, or do you feel the tape in your own fist? Do you think God is a prosecutor with better manners? If the all in all is truly all, where would he stand to accuse? Against whom would he take sides, since God is no respecter of persons? And if God has no persons to respect, whom are you defending? Which idol, which costume labeled the right one, stitched out of yesterday's pains, desperate not to be retired? The turning is simple, and it will feel like a small death to the part of you that lives on trials. If God is infinite presence, condemnation cannot be a divine faculty. It is a human habit profitable to the ego's business, fatal to your liberty. So let us bring the questions inside where they do their real work. Do you think the God self of you is offended? Is God in you frightened? Is Christ in you trembling about being disrespected at dinner? Or is that your beautiful, breakable humanhood, puffed up and thin-skinned, calling its bruise holiness so it will not have to heal? Do you think the kingdom withholds itself until you perform the correct disdain? Or is the kingdom at hand and your hand is busy holding a gavel? Here is the mercy that breaks the spell. Stop recruiting God to your verdict, and the verdict collapses. Let the warrant go unsigned. Stand 1 inch to the side of your righteous heat and ask, without flourish, Father, is this thy mind or my mask? If you are very still, you will hear an answer that is not a sentence but an atmosphere. Neither do I condemn thee. In that air, the personal self finds no oxygen for its theater. The lights go out on the bench, the robe slips to the floor, and an odd laughter rises, not mocking, but relieved as the prisoner and the judge discover they were the same actor changing hats in the dark. My yoke is easy, not because the world has improved its manners, but because your God is no longer a hired attorney. Die daily to the tiny magistrate, live instantly in the presence that needs no case. And as surely as night yields to morning without your supervision, you will find that what you could not forgive by force has already been dissolved by love, and the one you thought stood opposite stands inside the same life which was always and only God. Now let us admit where the trial loves to hold its sessions, not merely in the head, but in the ribs, under the tongue, behind the eyes. Judgment isn't only a thought, it is a way of inhabiting the body as a prison. Do you think it's the God self of us that tightens the jaw into a vice to prove a point? Do you think the Christ in you shortens the breath to punish a neighbor? Or is it our dear humanhood, robe fluttering, setting up shop between diaphragm and throat and calling its tension holiness? It's a tomb if you're living inside of it. It's only a body if you're outside, using it as an instrument. The personal self moves into the sternum like a landlord, nails the window shut, rehearses closing arguments at 2 a.m, and then wonders why dawn feels like a warden tapping the bars. Watch the first witness on the stand, the breath. Condemnation shortens it, forgiveness lengthens it. Condemnation climbs up into the chest and pecks like a small bird. Forgiveness drops the breath low and wide like a lake taking back its shoreline. Let everything that hath breath praise the Lord. Not everything that hath opinions, everything that hath breath. When the gavel lifts, listen for the breath's testimony. It goes shallow, then it stutters, then it holds itself hostage for the price of being right. And when grace enters even a sliver, the exhale finds a tail again. The shoulders slide down like 2 tired ushers finally off duty, and the face remembers it is not a mask. Here is a little practice for the moment the robe tries to settle on you. Let the body say, I am not living in the courtroom. How? The instant you catch the charge. Here is judgment. Let the abdomen soften by 1 honest inch, not collapse, soften. Let the jaw unhook from its imaginary piano. The tongue rest on the floor of the mouth as if it had forgiven the world. Let the face lose its subpoena. Smooth the brow as though a friendly hand ironed it once. Then lengthen the exhale by a quiet count 4, 6, 8, long enough to feel the verdict lose oxygen. This is not theater. It is testimony. You are instructing the body to stop serving as a tomb and to resume as an instrument. He breathed on them and saith unto them, receive ye the Holy Ghost. The breath is not God, but it is the first door that swings when the presence enters. I am confessional enough to tell you my jaw can bench press a piano when I am very right a dubious spiritual gift. I used to call that firmness. It was a crypt. The moment I began to practice this bodily repentance, relax the belly, soften the face, lengthen the exhale, something scandalous happened. The case that felt airtight developed a window. Through that window, the same presence we have been courting stepped in, and the corpse of my dignity sat up and laughed. There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus. Not no facts, not no boundaries, no condemnation. The body, no longer lived in as an identity, becomes a tool light enough for love to pick up. Do you think truth requires your trapezius to knot before you can speak it? Do you think wisdom needs a furrowed brow to be believed? Or is that just the old landlord collecting rent in aches? Step outside. Use the body. Don't live inside it. Outwardly cold-blooded, no flurry, no pantomime. Inwardly overheated with love for God and man, warm, lucid, available. Each time judgment knocks, answer with this trinity in the flesh. belly soft, face kind, exhale long. Then add the prayer of return you already know. Father, show me what is true here without my sentence. Watch how quickly the courtroom loses its jurisdiction when the bailiff your breath resigns. Make this your daily hygiene, like washing the hands before breaking bread. 70 times 7, if needed. Soften, unhook, lengthen. The signal will grow trustworthy. Soon you will feel judgment as a collar growing tight, and without waiting for a sermon, you will widen the collar, step outside the tomb, and find yourself using this body the way Christ used a boat briefly, beautifully, to cross. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And in the body that refuses to be a bench, liberty begins to move its fingers and sing. I knew it. I shouldn't have been invited here tonight. You should have included me out, because now we come to the part none of us signed up for with our best pen. The early glow of practice wears like a new suit. We carry our red letters in our pocket. We soften the belly. We lengthen the exhale. We declare, judge not. And for a glorious season, our favorite condemnations take a holiday. Then, like a cat that knows the route home, irritation tiptoes back when the children keep being children, when the colleague repeats his performance, when the news persists in being news, and a new costume appears in the mirror, not the angry one this time, but the saintly one, the forgiving person. Oh, I have worn that robe with a nice hem. I even adjusted the lighting so the halo would read in photographs. And then, one evening at the very table where my ministry is most thoroughly evaluated, family supper, the robe slipped, the old tone leaked, the fork became a gavel, and I discovered that the thrill of being right had lost its sugar. The seesaw had done its honest work, up in self-approval, down in disappointment, up in polished pity, down in a familiar heat that no longer tasted good. Name this accurately so you will not invent a new superstition. This is not God abandoning you. This is the extinction process of the personal self that needs enemies, projects, and delicate inferiors to feel coherent. Whosoever will save his life shall lose it. And the life we are losing here is the life of the actor who only knows his lines when there is a villain in the scene. The dark night of being right is simply the hour when your favorite judgments stop rewarding you and the counterfeit identity called the one who forgives better than others loses its allowance. Do you think it's the God self of us that used to feel satisfied by superior mercy? Do you think the Christ in you needs a foil so you can shine? Or is it our dear humanhood, always at the vanity, powdering itself with virtue so it can stay employed? Listen to the theater of the soul when it hits this silence. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? You'll hear it, not as blasphemy, but as the cry of a dissolving mask. God has not moved. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. What has left is the rush you falsely named presence. What has forsaken you is condemnation's paycheck. Blessed are the poor in spirit, is the blessing of this hour. Poor in spirit simply means you have run out of spiritual currency that spends well in the marketplace of being right. You are invited to die daily, not because heaven enjoys funerals, but because life enjoys being life without your management. And what shall you do when the old satisfactions fail? The personal self will propose a shopping trip, find a fresher outrage, a more fashionable cause, a subtler target you can judge under the banner of discernment. Decline. Don't rush to new targets. Don't paint old grudges with pastel colors. Don't audition for a different role in the same courtroom. Rest in not knowing until presence is felt again. Be still and know that I am God. Not know first, be still first. Tarry ye until ye be endued with power from on high. Wait, not as a sulking defendant, but as a willing emptiness. Let the bench remain unmanned. Let the breath lengthen without a case to breathe about. Let the body be outside itself, an instrument cooling on the counter. If a prayer wants words, Keep them brief and poverty-struck. Father, show me what is true here without my sentence. Or, not I, but Christ liveth in me. Do you think the infinite will punish your stillness by withholding clarity? Or is it the personal mind that panics when it is unemployed for 5 breaths? Let it panic. Let its hands flutter and find no gavel. In that waiting, something rises that neither flatters you nor scolds you, a seeing that is not your property. Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. Fall then. Let the seed of your precious rightness be covered. Let the little heat go out, and watch quietly, almost shyly, how a different life pushes up through the soil without permission from your opinions. When judgment stops paying, you are not failing, you are being promoted beyond currency. The saints call it purification. I call it losing your appetite for gristle. You will find, after a while, that you cannot chew what you once chewed with gusto. It tastes like rope. You would rather sit hungry in God than full in yourself. And then, as he always does, the presence feeds. Not a sugar high, but bread. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. You discover that being nobody in the moment is lighter than being the most forgiving somebody in the room. Outwardly cold-blooded, no drama to sell your sanctity. Inwardly overheated with love for God and man. Warmth that requires no audience. The bench remains retired. The prosecutor does not get a pension. And you, relieved, step again into the same world with the same faces, without the old theater and the quiet astonishment that what you could not change by verdict has already softened under the weightless authority of love. I will give you a play from my little theater, and you will know it's a composite because mercy protects the living. The first act opens with a metal door that kneels to no man's state prison, concrete kind, where the fluorescents hum like tired bees and the chaplain looks as though he's been handed every key in the universe except the one he most wants. I was invited to visit a young man we'll call M. He had thrown a punch in the yard the week before, and the guards were not rehearsing forgiveness. I confess to you, as the door clicked behind me and the air thinned into a recipe of disinfectant and despair, I felt the robe slide over my shoulders. My inner prosecutor had his opening argument ready. This one is dangerous. This is where firmness saves people. This is where you must be right. Catch. Be still. Recognize. The breath stuttered. I felt it. The body was about to become a tomb. I refused its contract. Belly soft by 1 honest inch. Jaw unhooked from its imaginary piano. Exhale lengthened until the heat lost oxygen. Be still and know that I am God, not the God of bars and bargains, the presence that has no enemies. I was in prison, and ye visited me. Not visited my case, my crime, my label, me. In that moment I remembered, not sentimentally, but as a steady fact, God is no respecter of persons, which means God has no use for my categories. The bench remained unmanned. I walked in not as a fixer with a moral thermometer, but as a man willing to be nobody in the moment so that Christ might be everybody. We sat on plastic chairs that argued with the floor. M talked like a storm that had been held in a bottle too long. I did not sermonize. Do you think the Christ in you needs a lecture to enter a room? Or is it our humanhood that feels underdressed without an opinion? I asked one small question when the wind paused. Where does it hurt this minute? Not history, this minute. He pointed not to his record, but to his chest. We breathed. Neither do I condemn thee. I did not say it out loud. I let it say me. The listening changed first. The room was the same room, bars, still bars, God, still God, but my ears stopped measuring his guilt and started hearing his person. The speech changed next. Instead of telling him what to become, a sentence arrived as if printed from somewhere quiet. If you like, I can sit with you tomorrow while you write your mother, and I can mail it. No heat, no halo, outwardly cold-blooded, inwardly overheated with love for God and man. Did the environment reform? No trumpets blew. The fluorescence hummed on. He did not float out of there on a cloud of good behavior and join the choir the same afternoon. But something freed itself in the only cell I am authorized to open mine. The hatred that had been sharpening a spear behind my ribs put it down and went home. Service became possible because there was no charge to keep it buzzing. Suddenly, I could be useful without playing savior. The next week, the chaplain told me M had asked to see the guard he hit. He apologized. No pageantry. He asked for a GED booklet, and the door in me stayed open, so I kept showing up. Bread sometimes, a stamped envelope, a silence that didn't flinch. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. It did not say, where policy shifts, there is liberty. Liberty began in the uncondemning, seeing that made a man in a cage feel less alone and a visitor less important. Act 2 is smaller, more domestic, but the set is the same. Conference room, glass walls, the kind where you can see your reflection being righteous while you discuss budgets. A colleague arrived armed with a spreadsheet that disagreed with my plan in 12 colors. I felt for the robe. My jaw reached for the piano. Catch, be still, recognize. Father, show me what is true here without my sentence. The humor of God winked. I saw that my plan was part seed, part vanity. His, part fear, part prudence. I said one sentence. Here are the 2 non-negotiables in my care. The rest is clay. Something unfroze. Did the boardroom become a revival? Hardly. But we left with a path forward and without the acid. And I walked out unshackled from the verdict I had been composing all morning, free to eat lunch like a human being instead of a disgruntled deity. So believe me when I tell you, the prison you walk into may not open its gates today. The family will keep being family. The news will persist in being news. The fluorescence will still hum. But the moment condemnation is caught and released through stillness and the recognition of Christ's presence, an inner door swings on noiseless hinges. The prosecutor in your head fails to report for duty, and with his absence, your hands are free for work that actually helps die daily to the bench. Walk in empty and overheated with love, and watch quietly, without trying to extract results, how the outer hardness becomes less of a master while the inner life becomes air again. This is not fantasy. It is the most practical liberty. The outer situation can be hard while the inner life is free if condemnation is dropped. Now make this wonderfully smaller. Not the grand pardon you frame and hang in the hall, but the little rinses all day long, the drip, drip, drip that clears a sink. 70 times 7 is not a math problem. It is hygiene. How oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? I say, not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. That is not a spiritual marathon. That is washing the hands before you touch the bread. Do you think the Christ in you requires a ceremony for each mercy? Or is it our humanhood that loves pageantry because it postpones obedience? So let forgiveness come small and frequent. At the store, when the line wriggles like a snake and the cashier learns her register in real time. Online, when a stranger explains your life to you with confidence and no data. In traffic, when the blinker is a rumor and the horn is a liturgy. At home, where the same 4 spoons are never where the charter says they belong. Each of these is a penny judgment trying to buy a kingdom. Catch them as sense, not as sense. The instant you feel the heat, the collar tighten, the jaw reaching for the piano whisper inside, here is the judge self seeking salary. Catch. Be still. Recognize. Belly soft by 1 honest inch. Jaw unhooked. Exhale lengthened till the case loses oxygen. Then, without flourish, say what heaven is always saying. Neither do I condemn thee. Not performative, factual. Turn your eyes from their costume to the life in them. Turn your eyes from your costume to the life in you. That is a micro-death to the personal self, and you may feel the pinch. Die daily, painlessly by inches, rather than theatrically by inches, plus applause. Let me offer you a little ritual with no incense and no committee. Morning before the feet touch the floor, while the world is still uncommitted. Set the intention without embroidery. Father, today I hold no one in condemnation, not even me. Let me see thy Christ in all who pass by. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Then pre-install the practice. Decide on your cues. Doorways become doorways to mercy. Every threshold you cross, you drop one tiny verdict. Red lights become altars. Every stop, lengthen the exhale and release one face from your private court. The scroll bar becomes a baptism before you scroll. Bury one opinion and raise it without a grudge. Midday, call it the lunch audit, not a scolding, an accounting that doesn't cook the books. Ask, whom have I silently sentenced since breakfast? The driver, the clerk, the colleague, myself for being slow to halo? Name them briefly and, with no drama, return the borrowed gavels. Catch, be still, recognize. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. Condemn not, and ye shall not be condemned. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. If you want a sentence, keep it poor and powerful. Father, show me what is true here without my sentence. Then, if needed, send one quiet amends, an email unclenched, a look that has lost its accusation, a glass of water delivered without commentary. Outwardly cold-blooded, no theater. Inwardly overheated, with love warm, lucid, available. Evening before sleep, turn in the day's warrants unsigned. Sit on the edge of the bed like a small king abdicating with relief. Lay out the micro-condemnations like coins you found in your pockets. I withdraw my verdict against the neighbor's weeds, the pundit's voice, the child's noise, the mirror's angle. I withdraw my verdict against my own slow learning. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Then rest your body outside itself, belly soft, face kind, exhale long, and let the presence announce, His mercies are new every morning. Go to sleep in God, not in the bench. And what if you fail by breakfast? You will. Congratulations, you're alive and not yet canonized. Begin again. 70 times 7 was given to people who would need it. Do you think heaven runs an audit on your audits? Do you imagine an infinite love with a little green visor doing 2 times 2 on your lapses? No. The only accountant is the personal self that needs a ledge to stand on and a ledger to prove it stood. Retire him without severance. Each little release is one less oxygen line to the ego's fire. Soon the blaze is a candle, and even the candle agrees to be light without smoke. Practice this way for a week and then for a life. You will discover that forgiveness, done as daily release, stops being a heroic act and becomes air. The judge self naps without pay. The rib cage ceases to be a courtroom. The mind has fewer chairs for witnesses. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, and when it does, let it take your wrath with it. By these small obediences, effortless as breath, you will find the atmosphere of your life changing without ceremony. My yoke is easy, not because they behave, but because the prosecutor has not reported for duty, and love, impersonal, steady, unexcited, and unafraid, has taken his desk. What then is this new climate when the prosecutor has retired and the bench sits empty? It is not a fanfare. It is a weather change. The mind quiets as if a radio has been turned from commentary to music. The body, which had been a courthouse on legs, becomes soft enough to be lived in from the outside. Again, belly easy, face unmasked. Breath unhurried, and underneath the ordinaries of the day, there begins a discreet effervescence, a little spring of bubbles like champagne that has no human reason for its rising. Do you think it's the God self of us that needed to be right in order to be safe? Or is it humanhood that mistook a verdict for shelter? When the need to be right is released, safety returns to its true address. Thou art my hiding place. Thou shalt preserve me from trouble. Thou shalt compass me about with songs of deliverance, and you find yourself strangely free to be simple, useful, and unoffended. Now let me twist the caution upright so you do not invent a soft heresy. This is not permissiveness. This is not denial. This does not make you a doormat with inspirational quotes printed on your back. Forgiveness does not blur reality. It clears vision. Let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. Christ's love is the only love I know that can say no without hate and yes without flattery. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Do you hear both? No condemnation and also no arrangement with the behavior that wounds. Boundaries drawn from presence are not bars. They are doors that open the right way. You will say, as simply as breathing, not in my home, not in my body, not in this conversation, and there will be no ash in your mouth, no aftertaste of triumph. Outwardly cold-blooded, no heat for theater, no need to stage your virtue. Inwardly overheated with love for God and man, warmth that does not collapse when disagreed with. This new freedom looks ordinary from the sidewalk. You go to work, you do the dishes, you answer an email without inserting a sermon. The novelty is on the inside. No one arguing behind your eyes. No committee meeting in your ribs. No ledger balanced by a little green visor every time a stranger behaves like a stranger. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth. That peace does not float you away from the world. It installs you in it as a quiet, available presence who can be trusted with a hurt because you do not need a culprit to feel important. And the funny tenderness of it all is that joy returns not as a parade, but as the lightness of unentertained grievance, the laughter that arrives when no one is on trial and the room is safe enough to be human. How do we keep the air clear? The same way we learn to breathe, by practice, not by mood. Keep the Christ words near. Carry them like lint you gladly discover in every pocket. Rephrase them until they feel like your own mouth saying what he meant. Judge not, condemn not, forgive. Say it in your language. I drop the case. I will not recruit God to my verdict. I return to presence. And the instant the robe rustles, catch, be still, recognize, 5 breaths, 1 inward sentence. Father, show me what is true here without my sentence. Then act, if action is required, from clarity without charge. Wise as serpents, harmless as doves, serpent enough to see what is, dove enough to love without contract. Die daily and discover it is not morbid, it is housekeeping. Each little death to the personal self sweeps a corridor, and the corridors connect until the whole house is bright and unoccupied by a bailiff. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Not freer, free. The body returns to being a boat you step into and out of to cross the lake. The mind becomes an instrument that plays what it is given without inserting a solo. Money returns to marbles. You can roll to a need without fear of poverty or pride of plenty. And best of all, forgiveness ceases to be an ordeal and becomes air. When there is no prosecutor in your head, you live in a country without prisons, though the maps still draw their line. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, and where liberty is, you will find yourself quietly astonished at how useful love becomes when it is impersonal, unoffended, and always at hand. My yoke is easy, not because they behave, but because the judge has gone home and the Christ has taken the seat that was always his.